Welcome to Chapter 2, Response to Intervention, Developing Success for All Learners. Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. This is one of these dry, boring chapters that you think to yourself, this is so technical. When you get out in the schools, this is probably the most important chapter that you'll have from this textbook. So please try to, as you go through this chapter, think about classrooms and how things work in the classroom. And I will try, I've already added some slides to this slideshow to try to make it make more sense to you. So here we go. To start with, let's talk about what RTI is in general. It has two purposes. In special ed, it's a way to identify specific learning disabilities by distinguishing between the kids who have a poor match between their skills and the demands of the setting and kids who actually have a disorder in the basic psychological processes needed for understanding and using language spoken and written, which is the definition of a learning disability. So let me see if I can make this real to you. So we have this kid in our class, and he is way below grade level in math. And so there are two possibilities. One possibility is that this kid actually has a disability in math. He has trouble understanding the symbols used in math. He has trouble understanding the processes used in math. And so what we need is a completely different way to teach him. In other words, he may in fact have a disability. The other possibility may be that this kid has not gotten adequate math instruction as he came through school. It may be that his math teacher is not using techniques that are up to date that take into account how children learn. It may be that the teacher herself doesn't understand math. And so before we put a label on a child and say this child has a learning disability, we want to first be able to eliminate anything that is getting in the way of him learning math. And so with RTI, what we're going to do is we're going to use a sorting system to figure out, as we increase the types of support that we give a child, does he begin to respond to the intervention? If so, then we were just seeing a mismatch. If not, then we may be looking at a disability. So that's how special ed uses RTI. In general ed, it's just a system to give maximums of support to all learners. RTI has 3 tiers in Mississippi. There actually are some states that have 4 or even 5-tier systems, but the most common is a 3-tier system. The support for RTI can be for academics, or it can be for behavior, or it can be for both. Each tier represents a subset of students, and each tier represents a different level of intensity of support. So tier 1 is what we do every day in our classroom for all the kids. It's differentiating instruction. It's making sure we use visual and auditory and kinesthetic means. It means that we have different kinds of assignments and different kinds of assessments. It means that we don't just teach things one way, we teach things multiple ways until we find the way that works for each child. Also part of tier 1 is what's called universal screening. And so what that means is that we do frequent assessments so that we can see the kids that are getting it and the kids that are not getting it. And for behavior, we're also doing screening to see the kids that are responding to the behavioral rules and procedures that we have in place and the kinds of surface management we're doing. And we're looking for the kids that are not responding to that. About 80% of kids are going to respond to just simple differentiation of instruction and rules and routines for behavior. For those that don't, we move to tier 2. So about 15 to 20% of kids are going to move on to tier 2. These are for the kids who did not respond in tier 1. We're going to be doing small group interventions a couple times a week, low intensive. But it'll be targeted to the areas that we identified in universal screening. And then in tier 3, these are the students who didn't respond to tier 2. I need to fix that on the slide, and I will fix that. So the students who did not respond to Tier 2, we move them to Tier 3, and this is going to be individual intensive intervention, 3 or more times a week. Again, data-driven. About 5 to 6% of kids are going to need this Tier 3 intervention. So what happens if we have a kid that we took them through Tier 1, we took them through Tier 2, we took them through Tier 3. By the way, we have to do an entire grading period or up to 16 weeks for each of Tier 2 and Tier 3, so it may take an entire year to take a kid through Tier 1, 2, and 3. At that point, if he's not responding to intervention, what do you think we can do? And the answer is, at that point, we can consider referring him for assessment in special education. So what is the role of teachers in an RTI model? Well, the role of the teacher is to identify the kids who need intervention, to provide evidence-based intervention to improve learning, to monitor the intervention, to make decisions with key professionals, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes, and to meet regularly with those who are invested in this child's education, which may include parents. So RTI came out of IDEA 2004. What it said was that the current model for screening students was not working, and so we needed a new system. As I already mentioned to you, what we're going to do with RTI for special education is we are going to use it as a way to determine who has a learning disability. And so instead of using the old system where we looked at what was the gap between the child's ability as measured by an IQ test and his achievement as measured by achievement tests, instead we're going to look at how is he doing in class, and in the areas where we've identified that he's not doing well, how does he respond to different, more intensive ways of trying to teach him the same information. And the idea being that if he does not respond to intervention, then he may have a learning disability and need to be referred for assessment. Here are some of the things that were happening. We had more than a 200% increase in identifying kids for specific learning disabilities. We were using a weight to fail method, and so what happened was that a kid could not get help until he actually failed a certain number of semesters or a certain number of years. There was subjectivity built in. I would say this kid couldn't learn when in fact it may be that I wasn't teaching. We didn't take into account how different states did things and how different school districts did things. We didn't have much information about how to improve things that weren't working. And so we were getting more and more students being identified, and the question came, did all these kids truly have a disability? So here are the components of response to intervention. The first is Tier 1. In Tier 1, we're going to implement effective classroom instructional practices for all the kids in the room. Tier 2, we're going to give secondary intervention, so on top of what we're already doing in Tier 1. So that means the kids don't leave the general ed classroom, it's just that we add instruction on top of what we're already doing. And then Tier 3 is more intensive, individualized instruction. The components of RTI models, we're going to use high-quality, research-based instruction that matches the needs of the students. We're going to monitor their learning over time by collecting data and charting the rate of learning. We're going to give interventions that have increased intensity when the child continues to struggle, and all of our decisions are going to be based on data, not just I know it's not working, or not just I know it's working, but here's what my data tell me. We're going to have frequent, ongoing measurement of student knowledge and skills. We're going to have some things we track with everybody. There'll be other things we track with just a few kids who are in Tier 2 or who are in Tier 3. Okay, so Tier 1 is primary instruction. The general ed teacher does it. It's evidence-based. We're going to use easy, what we call probes, to screen kids out. So in other words, just simple assessments that take about 10 minutes per student. We're going to do these at the beginning and the middle of the year for kids who stand out from the pack as far as being behind in math and reading. Then we're going to do additional progress monitoring, and we're going to adjust our instruction based on our assessment results. In secondary intervention Tier 2, we're going to find the kids in Tier 1 that were not responding. We're going to use small groups. We're going to supplement the core instruction that we did in Tier 1. This is still general ed, but special ed may consult on this. And in fact, some districts actually bring in outside consultants or reading or math specialists or behavioral specialists to help on this level. But the general ed teacher is still the one that's going to be monitoring progress. Tertiary intervention is Tier 3. Tertiary just means third. And so this is for longer periods of time. It's more frequent. In Mississippi, it's still general ed, and in Mississippi, you're going to have teacher support teams that are involved in Tier 3. Okay, so the teacher support team, the school may have one or more teams. Small districts may have a team for the whole district. The teams include members with relevant experience. One member has to have expertise in learning disabilities. Another should have expertise in the area of concern, say math. And the overall purpose is to make sure the RTI model is implemented effectively in the school. By the way, special ed people can be on the team, but they are not allowed in Mississippi to lead the team. What we're looking for is responders and non-responders. It is response to intervention. The responders are the kids who, when you change the instruction, they get it. These are the kids who are able to maintain grade level or near grade level performance. The non-responders are the ones who make minimal or no gains, or actually even lose their progress after being taught with high quality and validated interventions. These are the kids where the gaps keep growing between them and their peers. And these are kids where even when we use the best techniques we know, they don't seem to get it. We have a special set of kids that we need to pay attention to, and these are kids who are culturally and linguistically diverse. By separating them out into Tier 2, then we can begin to specifically look at how we're using language to reach these students, and how we also are making sure that we expand their environmental exposure to make sure that they are culturally responding, not just academically and behaviorally responding. We want to make sure for kids who English is their second language that we target reading, that we don't accept low performance, that we continue to monitor their progress. We need to understand that kids with English as a second language, sometimes they don't get identified as having a learning disability. Think about it. If you were in Germany and you had a learning disability, would they think it was just because you didn't speak German? That's the same thing we need to think about for kids here who don't speak English. We need to work with families. As soon as we move a child into Tier 2, we need to conference with the parents and explain to them the process. The 3-tier model depends on written plans. These plans have to identify all the factors that we are considering in the plan. And the special ed teacher, the main job is on that Tier 3 level, working as part of the intervention team.